Hello, I'm David Gibbons, and we're going to go down to the very bottom of the world, the southern hemisphere, to Latin America and Argentina, Buenos Aires, and our very good partner there in that part of the world is Gustavo Molinatti. Hello, Gustavo. How are you today? Hola.
How are you, David? Fine. Thanks again for this call.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, because our audience today are interested in knowing a little bit about what's going on in Latin America. So how has COVID-19 impacted the imaging supplies industry there in Latin America?
Well, as in the rest of the world, COVID impacted in different ways in each Latin American country. In general, all markets began to normalize their business in the imaging supplies industry. Even many companies assure or claim they are better than before the pandemic. I think this is because the market began to look for lower cost solutions compared to the OEMs, a fact that the aftermarket knows how to take an advantage.
Okay, so how are the OEMs themselves surviving? I mean, you had a video program there not long ago where some of the OEMs were talking about what was going on. How are they surviving there?
Well, for the OEMs have been a tough time also. During the lockdowns, all the OEMs worked very hard to meet the strong demand of devices and cloud-based solutions due to the work and studying from home. The inject devices, especially those based on ink tanks, showed a strong growth in all the region. I think in this battle during the pandemic, HP and Epson are, at least up to now, the winners compared with their competitors. And in the field of IP claims in Argentina, has been HP blocking some distributors for compatible inks in a large marketplace called Mercado Libre, and also in Mexico, Canon make some lockdowns, took from the selling some compatible cartridges. So I think in the next future we are going to see many of these actions from the OEMs protecting their lost market share by some IP claims.
And how about the aftermarket itself? I mean, have they closed down business? Are they looking for new business opportunities? Are some of them consolidating? What's going on there as far as the aftermarket is concerned?
Well, the aftermarket has always been, how you say, a restless segment, no? The aftermarket is always looking for new business, new opportunities. Those companies that knew how to take advantage of this change from the lockdowns in terms of demands of products and services were able to win new customers and to explore new opportunities. So although the aftermarket in all Latin America is mature, has consolidated, there are always new opportunities for new businesses in the region.
So what do you expect the new normal to look like after COVID-19 settles down? How's the imaging supplies industry going to react and interact with this new normal, whatever you think that might be?
Well, as I wrote, I want to make an advance of my editorial of the next magazine. I wrote that COVID did not invent anything. COVID just accelerated changes that were already in the process of development. For example, e-commerce, for example, teleworking, migration, or digital transformation. So it is difficult today to predict the new normal. But I think without any doubt that the office as a concept, we know the office will be transformed into a new hybrid space that will require new customized solutions.
So you think the imaging supplies industry has always been flexible, and now it's just going to continue to be flexible and just will move forward and it will survive?
Yes, one of the main characteristics of the aftermarket is to adapt to the new opportunities and to adapt to the difficulties, and also to take advantages from them. Yeah. So I think, yes, definitely the aftermarket will survive and definitely will overcome all these crises. Yeah.
So what opportunities exist for aftermarket suppliers, from outside of Latin America wanting to get into the Latin American market? What sort of opportunities exist there?
Well, I think the region is one of the has the largest opportunities in all the world. Really, Latin America is still a land with many opportunities. For example, many big buyers are looking for new suppliers of laser and laser products, inkjet products and printers, even from dot matrix printers. Then, for example, the new Chinese desktop printers, specialty printers, label printers, 3D, the handheld printers are also in the aftermarket radar. All kind of products and solutions designed for the SOHO market will have an important demand. And also, I think something very important that maybe many companies are not aware, there is an interesting spot for those who can deliver software and cloud-based printing solutions with security features. So I strongly believe that many companies, many big buyers, though they have actually many suppliers, they are looking for new ones and also to make a broader extension of their offerings.
Some countries have been impacted more than others by COVID-19. I think of Brazil, for example. So which of the countries do you think that are going to be getting back to business sooner rather than later? Colombia, Mexico, Argentina. Which countries, in your perception, are going to be the countries to watch for first?
Well, today the three countries that have been more impacted by the COVID are Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina. But the three of them, they began a new normal. I mean, in terms of business. Mexico also has returned to the activity. Also, as I told you, with new opportunities. So I think all the region is in fact working with new opportunities. And also, as I told you, many assures that they are working better than before the pandemic. So to tell some countries, from Mexico in the northern part of Latin America, and in South America, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru. It's also a great market for business. Argentina and Brazil, yeah.
Thanks, Gustavo, for joining me today and sharing some insights as to what's happening there in the Latin American market.
Okay, thanks to you, David.
Okay, so now we're going to swing across the world to Europe, where Mark Dawson is the RT Media partner. They're based in Amsterdam. Greetings, Mark.
Hello, David. How are you?
Good to have you on board. I'm interested to know, how is the imaging supplies market coping during the pandemic there in EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa?
Yeah, well, there's very little empirical market-specific data available, but we can see and hear and feel what's going on. I saw that IDC had released its executive summary for the first half, and they quote dollar value declines of anything between 8 and 13%, depending on the country. Yep. But those numbers don't feel right to me, David. I think they're much softer than what my gut tells me. I think the clearest indication is the OEM numbers, and they're published, they're in the public domain. And if you look at the quarter, May, June, and July, I think that's HP's third quarter, they show very specifically a decline of around 20% in their supplies revenues, which follows on from a 16% decline the previous quarter. Now that's pretty serious, and that is taking into account an uptick that they've had in the SOHO space and the B2C Inc. space, meaning that the decline in the office, is even more significant. If you look at Xerox, and Xerox doesn't really have the presence that HP has in the SOHO space, they're talking about a 35% decline in revenues in their second quarter, which is April, May, and June. That illustrates their dependence on the office space. Ricoh, 26% decline. So, it wasn't pretty before the pandemic. Now, I think in the OEM arena, it's carnage. And all those guys will be focused on taking even more cost out of their businesses while trying to accelerate their plans for pivoting. So the question I would ask is, how long before we see serious and deep consolidation, which I believe is long overdue in any case. Now, from an aftermarket standpoint, we've always done very well and prospered traditionally when the economy's in recession, but we've also been impacted. I mean, you can't insulate yourself from such a major event. And I think any player in the laser or copier segment is going to be hurting. The inkjet segment, as I've referenced already, has grown significantly, but that's brought its own challenges, most notably, collection of empty cartridges. So it's not pretty, would be my summary.
What do you expect the new normal is going to be like? I mean, are people going to go back to the office, or are they going to be working more and more from home? And will that have an impact in a longer term on what happens with supplies in Western Europe?
Yeah, well, those are the imponderables. I mean, there are three questions that, we would all like to be able to answer. How long is this pandemic going to last? We see in Asia now, and particularly where you are, things seem to be under control, but that's not the case here. We're moving into harder and harder measures, heading towards, here in the Netherlands, heading towards a second lockdown, which will probably be announced next week. So the first thing is, how long is it going to last? And the second thing is, as and when we move through it, what will the traditional landscape look like? How much activity will return to the traditional corporate office, and how much will stay in the SOHO space? And the third thing, of course, is what will the total consumption look like? Because we already knew that the number of printed pages was in decline before all of this happened. So none of us really know exactly how it's going to look, but we do know it's going to be changed. I think what we should focus on is what we do know, and use that to adjust our sales and change our strategies. I think that for sure here in EMEA there will be a recessionary climate, and as I've said earlier, our industry traditionally prospers in that environment. We're going to have organizations, big and small, public sector, private sector. They're all going to be looking more than ever before to achieve cost reductions. And our industry delivers that. That means we have opportunity. And we mustn't forget hardware as well as supplies. I mean, for the remanufacturers out there, there is an increasing opportunity, in my belief, to refurbish devices and cycle them back for better value to these organizations. And where you're sitting, David, you'll be aware more than I am of some emerging new OEMs. And there's never been a better time, I don't think, to take on those established players, because they are, they're in panic is maybe too strong a word, but they have some big challenges. And now is the time, I think, to come and disrupt if you are a new emerging aspirational OEM. Your next point was the shift to Soho. That there's no doubt at all that we have seen a huge shift towards Soho working. We don't know how much of that's going to stick, but we know some of it will. There are two schools of thought. One is that, it will be a significant change, and others are saying that actually in the end, people will, come back to the offices. In terms of the opportunities that this presents, we've got to be looking at subscription models like the OEMs do. That's a major opportunity. The channel resellers out there will need support to build subscription models, and that support should come from the manufacturers in our space. Let's not forget that the Soho page is much higher value. It's produced on a smaller footprint device, and it's often a much, much more expensive page than the one that's printed by the floor standing device in the main office. Sometimes, I did some back of envelope calculations the other day, and sometimes it can be as much as 10 times more expensive. The other thing that I think is a factor is, in the Soho space, you're not using a work group printer that is, 10 meters away or at the end of the corridor. And I happen to believe that the proximity of the device to the worker in the Soho space is going to result in some increase in output, just because it's convenient. You print it because you can. You don't have to get up. It's at your desk. And I think there are major automation and software opportunities as well to reduce the administration burden that these corporations are looking at. An army of I've said this before, an army of managers and executives working from home, delivering a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, doing their thing to replicate that corporate office experience, buying devices and supplies with a company credit card or a personal credit card and expensing that. That's a massive, massive administration exercise to process all those transactions and book them in the right place under the right ledger code in the ERP system. So there's a huge automation opportunity to give the organization the control back and to give them the visibility on the expense, which is now very fragmented rather than being centralized. So, there are two opportunities based on, I think, what we can say we know is going to happen. I think the other opportunity is perhaps more controversial. You've heard me talk, David, in the past about the blue ocean and the industry's opportunity to take share from the OEM. That will always provide the biggest opportunity. But like it or not, we have internal aftermarket competition in our industry. And there's no question the pandemic has weakened certain players and made them vulnerable. And I think that's an opportunity for, let's say, some of the financially stronger players, some of the better organized players to take advantage, whether that's focused attacks on strategic accounts, whether it's poaching, good salespeople, or ultimately whether it's looking at, acquisitions in this chaos, because valuations will be lower, than they were a year ago. So there's some value to be had, I think, but that requires very good market intelligence and knowledge of the competitive landscape to exploit. And I also think there'll be some diversification opportunities. We tend to think of print in a narrow sense, office printers, home office printers. When we look at the explosion of e-commerce and we look at the number of labels being printed and the barcodes being printed, there's a massive opportunity there. And, thermal transfer, inkjet, laser, all of those technologies are involved in that market. And you can take it wider. You can look at packaging itself. Again, e-commerce has exploded during the pandemic, and the number of parcels that are being delivered to homes and to businesses is off the chart. So packaging itself, inkjet, digital inkjet presses very important there. They all need ink. They all need ink. And let's not forget the printed book. We've seen a renaissance of the physical book during this whole 6-month period. So, whether it's maximizing the current markets we're in, or looking at new markets, bringing in software automation tools, the industry's not going away. There's going to be a lot of opportunity.
Did you want to tell me and drill down in any more detail about, country by country, about how the OEMs are prospering? Or did you feel that you answered that question before?
Yeah, no, I think, prospering's possibly not the right word where the OEMs are concerned. I think it's more a case of which OEMs are hurting the least. As I referenced earlier, those OEM results are, they're deep declines, David. Huge. Look at the OEMs that have exited the Soho and inkjet space in the last years. Lexmark, Xerox, Kodak, they all had an inkjet offering, and of course, pre-pandemic, it was seen as a lower value segment of the market, and it was in faster decline, making it less attractive. So, I understand why those businesses exited. But now we have HP, Canon, Epson, and Brother as the remaining players in the inkjet market, and they're all reporting significant growth in sales to the home office market. I think Epson stands out as the most interesting one because, excuse the pun, they have a laser-like focus on disrupting the office space, ironically, with ink. But their history and their background is in ink for the Soho market. And this pandemic has, I would say, increased the acceptance of ink, and could be the catalyst that blows away this somewhat stubborn anti-ink bias that's been in place in the office for a long time. In terms of the major markets here in Europe, I think the UK is hurting the most. And I think that's primarily due to government support packages almost incentivizing businesses to furlough people. So, the government is paying people as long as they don't work. Whereas other countries, including the Netherlands, has been supporting the companies so that they can have people working from home rather than being furloughed. And that's delivering, higher rates of productivity. And initially, of course, it's transferred those tasks to the home. But we see in Germany and France, particularly, more people are returning to the office compared with, say, UK, Spain, and Italy. So those geographical differences will also affect how the OEMs perform in the different markets. But definitely, I see Epson as a standout player in terms of, their Workforce Pro devices and how they may well be able to accelerate into the office market when we do return to some semblance of normality.
So what opportunities do exist then for aftermarket companies wanting to reach the EMEA market? And, let's include the Middle East here as well.
Yeah, I think I covered those in my previous answer. The opportunities, because we're in recessionary times, means that end users need cost savings, and we deliver cost savings. Our aftermarket has always delivered cost savings versus the OEM, and I think that's the most significant factor. Again, coming back to Soho, like I say, subscription models, higher value pages, potentially an increase in output there. That's all opportunity. The channel will need support. I don't think we can carry on just shipping containers of cartridges. There needs to be a much more consultative approach to supporting the channel. We are, as a society, moving away from relationship-based selling, moving towards process and automation and digital marketing. And that requires distribution infrastructure. So there's definitely an opportunity in Europe and the Middle East and Africa for players that would like to have bigger market shares in those geographies to build or acquire infrastructure that will allow them to properly support the local channels to navigate this new market situation.
Thanks, Mark, for joining us today.
My pleasure, David. Have a great day.
Well, let's go deep down under now to South Africa, where Stuart Lacey operates, has his head office there, DeLace, and he's also an RT media partner, and we're very pleased to have him there. Greetings, Stuart. How are you?
Good morning, David. Thank you very much. Yes, very well, thank you. And I hope everything's good with you guys in China.
It's all good here too. Thank you for joining us. First question I want to ask is, what is the situation there now like in Africa, and what's going on?
Probably very much the same as a lot of other countries. We've been through severe lockdowns in many of the countries. A lot of them have come out of lockdown now. They're feeling a little bit more confident to start opening up trade in the borders. The big worry for us now, though, is trading partners in Europe, for example. They're going back into a severe lockdown, which is obviously hurting a lot of the main exporters out of Africa. GDP growth, as an example, in South Africa was negative 50% in the last quarter, which I think to a lot of people seems total forecast for the year looks at negative 7%. North Africa, very similar sort of numbers, but their forecast is negative 2%. The only real region that is looking sustainable at the minute is East Africa, where they've been having 5.1% GDP growth. The forecast this year is 5.2, and next year is 5.4. So East Africa as a block seems to have been a little bit more resilient than some other countries.
So what's the new normal going to be like for printing consumables, looking into 2021 and beyond?
The outlook is very favorable, which may seem strange. As I've stated, the GDP growth is negative in most countries. We've seen a lot of the OEMs struggle. We've seen them downsize. Certain OEMs here have left go at least 33% of their workforce. So we're seeing a lot of the OEM dealers and OEM distributors cross-border, across Africa, actually not being able to get product. So the new norm for us, we see is an increased demand, but the product has to be locally available. The financial crisis, the restrictions on importing and transport has made it vital to have locally available products across the continent. And I think the new norm for us especially is to ensure that there is a full range of products available domestically.
So does that provide an opportunity for the aftermarket, do you think? Particularly the aftermarket that's interested in, coming into Africa and investing and also providing, products for distribution?
I think the opportunity is better than I've ever seen it in obviously nearly 30 years in this business. The key to all of that is you need to be here locally, whether your hub is in South Africa or East Africa, but you've got to be closer to the territories. I think the demand for a company within the continent that has copier products, compatible cartridges, inks, spare parts, fuser units, and the list goes on and on and on, is considerable. But it's as I say, and I'll say it again, it's all about having local product. And as we've talked about many times, doing business is not easy on this continent. And you need to be very wary of who you are trying to associate and who you are trying to use to import and distribute products.
Does that mean having good partnerships with people such as yourself and others who can sort of steer the way? Because otherwise, when we talk about the jungles of Africa, you may very well find yourself in a industry jungle if you're not careful.
Very much so. Very much so. They are not stupid here. They certainly know how to do good business, but they certainly recognize somebody who's weak and doesn't understand how to do business on this continent. So, please be very wary of coming into this territory naive and not understanding the potential downfalls.
You've talked about East Africa. What about countries like Nigeria, which is a very large, has a very large economy? Ethiopia, which seems to be opening up. It's for trade and that sort of thing. Have you got any reflections on, say, those two or any other countries there in Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. Ethiopia, a fascinating place to visit and understand. Good business. But unfortunately, at the minute, because of the economic situation, it's very, very price orientated. If you've got the cheapest product, you will probably get some business. But I think that's a short-term strategy. There's certainly requirements for, higher quality, guaranteed products, but people don't want to pay the OEM price anymore. They can't afford it. So there's certainly a gap in the market for, and we see it around the world, branded, compatible products with full warranties. Nigeria, no different. They've got their own political problems, as some people might have seen in the last week, 10 days, very unstable at the present. And as soon as that happens, there's no local investment and everybody holds on to their cash. But it's such a massive market. It's so dynamic, so interesting. But it takes a while to understand how to do good business on that in that country.
People watching us now should contact you. We'll put your URL or your email address on the screen, and people can contact you, and you can work out some business relationships with them if you'd like. I'm sure they'd be interested. Thank you very much,
very
Stuart,
kind of you, David.
Today. Thank you. Now we're off to Russia. Here at RT Media, I'm very honoured to have a strong business relationship with Dr. Yulia and Dr. Stanislav Malinsky in Russia. Based in Moscow, they head up the Business Inform information agency for government and enterprises focusing on printers and supplies. And Dr. Yulia joins me now. Greetings, Yulia. How are you?
Greetings, David. I'm fine, thank you. Not bad, thank you.
So tell us, Yulia, how has COVID-19 impacted the imaging supplies market there in Russia?
Oh, David, of course, I can say that COVID-19 pandemic affected the Russian market quite deeply. And of course, the absolutely total lockdown resulted in diminishing of demands for office printing and so for office equipment and supplies. And of course, in the end, we saw that the sales of printing supplies dropped by 12 to 15%. Of course, I mean in pieces. Yeah, of course. But I can say that at the same time, new realities forced people and companies to search other type of communications. And as you see now, we have our online interview, and of course, we arranged a lot of different online conferences and meetings. And I can say that during the period of lockdown and after that, we had around 10 online meetings with big buyers where we discussed the advantages and disadvantages of different brands which is provided and on our Russian market. And we saw a higher interest of big buyers to this information and to high quality printing supplies. And of course, to the supplies which quality was confirmed by Russian testing method. And finally, we got a lot of requests for information about what kind of brands are high quality, what kind of the difference between different brands, where they are on sale in Russia, and many requests. And of course, in the end, we are very satisfied with such high interest to our work at first.
So government and enterprises, they trust you to be able to provide the information that they need to be able to get the right kind of supplies that they need there in the market. So the connection with you is very important.
Yeah, of course, because we have been doing, yes, in this field and working in this field for a long period of time, you know, that more than 20 years. Yeah, of course.
And you're publishing magazines, you've got an online expo and all those things as well. So tell us, Yulia, what is the trend with OEM versus aftermarket supplies as you look forward into 2021?
I can say that in Russia, remanufactured and new built cartridges have been taking the biggest part of the Russian market. For example, in 2019, the OEM cartridges, the share of OEM cartridges was around 13%, of new build cartridges, 22%. Whereas the remanufactured OEM cartridges and remanufactured new build cartridges had around 65%. And in this year, in 2020, the ratio is absolutely the same. And we are waiting that in the year, the share of OEM cartridges, yes, won't be more than 12%.
So what should Chinese, and for that matter, other countries as well, in Europe and elsewhere, the aftermarket suppliers in these countries wanting to sell into the Russian market do to comply with the new standards and the new quality standards that are being set up? What do they need to do?
I think that they need to do absolutely the same what European, US and Indian companies are doing now. First of all, of course, we recommend to get the virtual booth on our virtual expo because it's the simplest way to be interesting for Russian customers. Because they can reload and upload the information on their virtual booth, and our specialists translate their information very quickly into Russian, and we email it through our database, and it's contained of 15,000 addresses of Russian specialists. So you see that it's quite huge database, and a lot of Russian specialists get this information. Secondly, I think it's trends have changed, and so now big buyers and our customers are not ready to waste money. And they trust quality of supplies, which is confirmed by Russian testing method. So I think that Chinese manufacturers should be ready that their goods be tested in our competence center, because Russian Association established the competence center where we do testing for brands which want to work, yes, on Russian market. And we can say if we get good results, of course, it's absolutely available for buyers. But if these results are not so good, yeah, so this information is absolutely confident, and we provided only company which ordered this testing. And the last one, of course, it's necessary to work directly with potential buyers. And we can say that we see what kind of our subscribers are interested in particular information about particular brands. So we are ready to share this information with manufacturers and sellers. And I think it can help them to establish the direct connection with potential buyers. So we are ready to provide all options.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining with us today and sharing this very important information with our viewers. Thank you, Dr. Yulia.
Thank you, David. Thank you for inviting.